have seen the torch of freedom pass from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all.
So, with deep appreciation for the blessings of freedom that we know in this great land of ours, I'm Dr. George Simon, welcoming you to another edition of Character Matters. This is the program where we talk about what I consider to be the defining issue of our time, the character crisis that we find ourselves in, and the devastating effects that it's had on all aspects of our life, and what we can do about it. And if you want to join the conversation, I welcome you to do so at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Once again, I'm Dr. George Simon, and this is Character Matters. After all, character does matter. It matters more than anything else. It affects every aspect of our lives, and it is causing us, the character crisis that we have right now is causing us all kinds of problems in our culture, in our society. And boy, was that on display this past week in the Republican debate televised on the Fox News channel. You know, I love the political season because if there ever was an endless parade of really character-impaired individuals, it's these power-hungry individuals who are so full of themselves and so full of something else, who cannot help but reveal themselves in their manipulative behaviors, especially when they're put on the spot by decent journalists, which, by the way, are hard to come by these days, but nonetheless, it's always interesting to see what happens in those cases. And boy, did we get a great example of things this past week in the first televised debate. 24 million people supposedly tuned in. That's really a phenomenal audience. There were folks raving on Twitter and on the news pieces and on Facebook about the fact that Jon Stewart's farewell program had a record 3.4 million viewers tune in. Well, you know, 3.4 million is actually a lot for a cable channel. It's not really great numbers, but 24 million, that's a lot of folks, especially these days for one network, especially a cable network. And that's how many tuned in to see these buffoons, largely, on the stage, revealing themselves It was really very interesting. Perhaps nothing more interesting than Mr. Trump, and we're going to have a lot to say about that today. Because if there ever was a poster child for a particular kind of character disturbance, that is Mr. Trump. And I really I think he's going to do us all a favor. You know, I actually respect some things about this man, uh, but and I actually don't think that some of his points have been all that bad. Um, but if there were ever an example of two things, number one, um, how much character matters, and how this particular character disturbance is finally getting the attention of folks as such an egregious example of what can go wrong in a person's character development. So that's one thing. But the other thing is our society, our culture, and how it not only fosters, but even sometimes rewards certain kinds of character disturbance. You know, uh, Mr. Trump has enjoyed an awful lot of success financially. Yes, he's gone bankrupt a couple of times. Uh, he's, as he put it in his own words, dropped the ball, uh, was living high off the hog, and didn't tend business very well, and didn't see the warning signs early on, and didn't take the right kind of actions, and got into trouble, and used the very liberal bankruptcy laws of the United States. You know, it's really great. You can, if you've got the right friends in the right places, you can use all the money that good people put into banks, scrimping and saving. You can use all the money that's there if you know the right bankers, and do all kinds of things. And then when you get yourself into trouble, basically leave the creditors stuck, and not really take any hit yourself if you're savvy enough to do it. And Mr. Trump's not the only one to have done it. And you know, we just came out of a crisis second to none, really second to none. The financial crisis that we suffered not too many years ago was unprecedented. And who bailed out these fat cats with their huge egos and their incredible greed? We did. We still owe plenty. We've taken on so much debt, it's just not funny. It's tragic. We are in such desperate circumstances. We just haven't fully realized it yet. Not all of the proverbial crap has hit the fan. Well, somehow the call failed. Once again, you know, we've had some problems with our calls, so I will ask if you don't mind. When you try to call in at 718-717-8296, that's 718-717-8296. If you have a problem calling in, please just hang up and call in again. I'm not sure what the issue has been, but we'll try and resolve this problem as best as we can. But many times, as it turns out, when people have trouble calling in, if they just hang up and dial in again, a couple of minutes later, they're able to get through. So please don't give up. If you're trying to call in and you have a problem, just hang up and then try again a couple of minutes later, and hopefully you'll get through. Once again, the number to call is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Well, any rate, back to the poster child. I write in my books, In Sheep's Clothing and in Character Disturbance, and also even in the Judas Syndrome. I think all three of my books have information on narcissistic individuals. But I really go into depth in character disturbance in particular on this character type. And it's really unfortunate because we have an awful problem. We have an awful lot of these folks around these days. And it just so happens that the official guidebook, the official classification book for mental disorders published by the American Psychiatric Association, in their infinite wisdom, in this last edition, the DSM-5, in their infinite wisdom, the powers that be decided that they would basically declassify narcissistic personality disorder as an official personality disorder. And there's two reasons why they did this. One is that narcissism is a dimension of personality that affects all kinds of personality disturbances, all kinds of disturbances of character. So whether or not there is a distinct syndrome or not, the powers that be were not sure. I actually do believe that there is a distinct syndrome. The other question was, though, it speaks to the issue of what exactly constitutes a disorder, especially a personality disorder. We all have personalities. We all have a personality of one type or another, and everybody's personality is different. But what makes a disorder, what makes a certain personality type a disorder is when the personality itself, when an individual's preferred way of seeing the world and doing things, their basic style of interacting and coping with the world, which is what personality is all about. A disorder is when that basic style of relating is either so inflexible or has traits that are so extreme, so deviant from the norm, and that are socially and occupationally dysfunctional to the point where the person basically is malfunctioning. So that constitutes a disorder. In other words, they're causing problems because of who they are. The individual's basic makeup is a problem. How they relate is a problem. It causes problems in relationships. It causes problems on the job. How they're shaped up basically to respond, to see the world, to see others, and to interact in particular ways with others. Their basic style of relating is a problem in and of itself, and that's what constitutes a personality disorder. Well, some individuals, especially individuals in our culture who have narcissism, who have a great deal of narcissism, actually function fairly well, especially occupationally. Some do more than well, and some get more than just a lot of social reinforcement for the way that they conduct themselves. Mr. Trump has a lot of ardent admirers. And there are some folks who we would say are sycophants, who, as a matter of fact, one of his advisors, whom, of course, and this is classic. This is classic narcissistic speak. This is classic egotist speak. In that this one advisor who was upset about the way Mr. Trump was not basically owning and apologizing for the nature of some of his comments, the tone of some of his comments, unnecessarily divisive, unnecessarily hostile in tone, especially toward women. Perhaps he had a point about the fact that sometimes we go overboard with political correctness, but also there is the issue of just a modicum of civility, of just basic human civility. And, there is such a thing as just being reasonably kind. And you don't have to be brutish to get a point across. So basically, this one advisor was trying to tell Mr. Trump, he's been a close advisor for many years, that he thought that he was hurting himself and the campaign. And Mr. Trump said, no, I'm not. Look at the polls. The after debate survey showed that I didn't lose any ground whatsoever. So I'm going to keep on doing like I'm doing. And the advisor said, well, that poll is not very scientific. We won't know for a couple of days until a more scientific poll has come out. And when that happens, you're likely to see a drop, and we don't want that. And besides, even if that is not true, the higher road is to take a different tone. And Trump wouldn't listen, so his advisor quit. But in classic egotist speak, Trump was quick to say, no, he didn't leave, I fired him. Nobody leaves me. I fire. Nobody quits on me out of their dislike or disfavor of me. Only I decide those kinds of things. And it's just very classic. But the real irony is that now a scientific poll has come out post-debate, and it turns out that Trump has another reason to reinforce his style. He has another reason to think he's all that. Because the latest poll said, although he didn't make any points, he didn't lose any. His supporters are still sticking with him. And he may have even strengthened his base just a little bit. So his numbers have stayed the same, even though some folks who were not his most ardent supporters before found his comments offensive and indicated they were less inclined to vote for him. So even in the face of that, it turns out that he's still on top of the pack. And these are the very kinds of things that reinforce, for narcissistic individuals, these are the very kinds of things that reinforce their self-image. You know, it's the very nature of character disturbance. It is the very nature of character disturbance that the person with the character disturbance doesn't think they have a problem. Everybody else thinks they have a problem, but they don't think so. And then they point to evidence that they're winning. They divide up the world into winners and losers. And when they're winning, at least in their view, it doesn't have to be objective. It's worse if it is objective. In other words, if there's ample evidence, objective evidence, that they are, at least in some areas of their life, winning, oh gosh, God help us. I mean, it's all the more reason for their head to get so fat. And you know, the classic ridiculous paradigm for these individuals had long been that underneath it all, these egomaniacs were shy, insecure, damaged individuals underneath, suffering from low self-esteem, struggling with an impaired sense of self-worth, and trying basically to prove to everybody that they were worth a darn. And this notion has persisted for a long, long time, as erroneous as it is. Now, let me back up here just a little bit. There actually are some cases. There are some cases where someone's surface level conceit is just a mask for some inner insecurity. There are cases of that. They're just extremely rare, especially in our day and age. They didn't used to be so rare. In times past, in socially repressive times, they weren't so rare. And I can understand how maybe in years past these crazy kinds of theories got started about what makes a person an egotist. But in our day and age, in our age of rampant character disturbance, in our age of entitlement, in our age of me, believe me, most folks with big fat heads and who think they are all that really do think so. Worse, some don't just think they're all that. They know they're all that. They're convinced of it. Nothing can shake them. And if God help them, they have ample objective evidence that supports their contention. You know, like they've managed to corral a lot of money or a lot of influence or power. Then they have even more reason, quote unquote, justification to think they're all that. This is why I say this character crisis that we're seeing is a phenomenon of our time. It's a phenomenon of our culture. We foster these kinds of things with the social climate that we've created. And as I've said many times before, it truly is a vicious cycle. One feeds on the other. The fact that we have so many character-impaired individuals these days is what has helped create the cultural climate that we have, the climate of entitlement and permissiveness, of no boundaries, of no respect, of no limits, no interpersonal regard. The fact that we've have so many character impaired individuals among us has helped create this climate. And then also, the climate itself affects the character development of individuals growing up in it. So that as a result of the cultural climate, as a result of the cultural atmosphere, more and more of our young people are entering adulthood with serious character issues. People are getting it in midlife, sometimes, long after their fourth or fifth marriage, long after their fourth or fifth sabotaged career. Many folks are kind of getting a clue about what a responsible life is all about, what a values-driven life is all about, and what those values need to be. Sometimes that doesn't happen until a person's 50s or 60s these days. Sometimes it doesn't happen at all. These are the times in which we live. Very interesting time. And what it spawns, is individuals like Mr. Trump. Now, there have always been narcissists with us. But this man is a poster child. He's a poster child. And, the characteristics of narcissists are the same whether they have any objective justification for their self-image or not. When these individuals go looking for their life's satisfaction, all they have to do is look in the mirror. And everything they need is right there looking back at them. They are just completely content with themselves. They don't really need anybody else in their lives. Now, they may want someone else in their lives. They may have some use for them. And they tend to exploit opportunities with the best of them. But that's not the same as having a real emotional need for someone. And being driven in part by that need to pay some respectful heed to the other person's wants and needs. So this is the way it is for a narcissist. They have it all. They are all they need. They are perfectly content with themselves. They don't just think they're great, they know they're great. And like I said, God forbid, if in fact there's any kind of objective evidence to affirm this self-appraisal, to give them some validation. And like I said earlier, it really, these individuals, narcissists, look the same way whether they've got anything to show for themselves or not. There are plenty of individuals out there with just the same kind of ego, just the same kind of brashness, just the same kind of disdain for folks that they see as lower than them. There are just as many of those folks out there like Mr. Trump who have absolutely nothing to show for themselves. This is a personality, a character issue. It's not founded on reality. So there are folks who think they're all that, who have absolutely nothing to back it up. And there are folks who think they're all that, who have something that lends some credibility, at least, to the appraisal that they give of themselves. But in either case, the degree of their haughtiness and the degree of their disdain for others is offensive to most folks. And it used to be very dysfunctional, which is why we called it a disorder. We called it a disorder because it wrecked relationships. But these days, relationships fall apart all the time for all kinds of reasons, sometimes for very frivolous reasons. And it used to cause problems in the workplace. But these days, many of these individuals actually thrive. There are certain corporate cultures tailor-made for such individuals. There are certain other enterprises, especially entrepreneurial enterprises, where these folks fit very well. So it would be you'd be hard pressed to accurately label by the current standards that we have these folks as disordered, even though most folks would agree you certainly wouldn't want to live with or have to work with somebody of this character type. Although some do. You know, many times it comes down to the dollar. You know, if you're going to be in such an environment where such character traits are prized or even valued, and you're making a lot of money, despite the fact that you have to deal with that horrendous ego every day, despite the fact you have to deal with that haughtiness and that disdain, you might put up with it if you're making enough money. You might just bide your time till you're ready to move on. And then, of course, if you ever do quit, the narcissistic boss is likely to say, no, you didn't quit. I fired you. Because nobody falls under disfavor with me. I'm too great for that. Nobody falls under disfavor with me. Nobody gets unenamored of me. I'm too wonderful for that. It couldn't be that you had enough of me. It's that I had enough of you. It's just really remarkable. It's going to be a fun political season. I can just tell that. At least it's going to be fun for me to watch it, I think. It's really pretty sad. The title of this program is Character Matters because it matters most of all, and it matters so much in a person who would lead us. You know, above and beyond all else, we need the folks who are vested with the power to really to make decisions that affect the lives of so many people. We need people entrusted with that power to be tremendously values-driven people. And we need to know that the values that do drive them are the values that we want them to have. That they are truly noble values and not their own individual self-serving ones, those that we would have a problem with. We need that so desperately, and it is so sad. It's just so sad. that there are so many people vying for a chance. And I can find only a handful, less than that even seem to me to have enough character, a modicum of character, that I would feel almost comfortable vesting them with the power that goes along with the presidency of the United States. And that's a really sad statement, but it's also a really illustrative statement about the zeitgeist of our times, the character of our times. We live in a time when just about every institution that's left has been corrupted to the point that we foster this kind of character disturbance in the development of our individuals. And that we have produced so many character dysfunctional individuals. It's a national tragedy. We are literally burying ourselves before our very eyes. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. We have not always been great. I've seen that clip on YouTube many times from that Jeff Daniels program on HBO that went viral a few years ago and keeps making the rounds from time to time, where he dared to say that this is not the greatest place. We've had some great periods in our culture. We've had some great periods in our history. But we haven't always been great. There have been some times that we really rightfully ought to have held our heads collectively in shame for the kinds of things that we did, the kinds of things we permitted, the kinds of things we ignored. Times when we basically trampled our own professed values. And there have also been times where it seems like we found our soul, that we claimed our values, and we rose to the occasion. And we were great. There have been times, moments, years, periods of true greatness. Unbelievable greatness. And prosperity that came along with it. But no longer. We're in a state of real decline. And what's driving the decline is the character crisis that we're in. And as I said before, it's a vicious cycle. The more character impaired folks we have, the more our culture erodes, the more the traditions, values, and standards that made us great and promoted character development erode. And of course, as they erode, then the number of character impaired individuals rises. It's a true vicious cycle. And it has to be broken. So how do you do that? You do it one heart at a time. Been sounding the alarm myself for over 30 years now. Writing my book, In Sheep's Clothing, Understanding and Dealing with Manipulative People, Character Disturbance, the Phenomenon of Our Age, the Judas Syndrome, and posting weekly articles on my blog at manipulative-people.com. That's www.manipulative-people.com. And on the counseling resource website at www.counselingwith2lsresource.com. The blog there is called Psychology, Philosophy, and Real Life. So writing those articles for the blogs, writing my books, doing this program, Character Matters, getting the message out every single Sunday. Every single Sunday evening that character does matter. And once again, if you want to join the conversation, maybe you want to chime in with some of your own thoughts about the debate, about Mr. Trump's performance, about any of the articles that I've posted, a new series beginning on the art of the lie. It's going to be an interesting series about all the subtle ways the connivers and deceivers make a mess of relationships because they just cannot be truthful. Just will not be truthful. We'll have an interesting series on the art of the lie. But anyway, if you have a comment or a question, or you want to chime in with your own opinions on matters of the day, on the issues we've been talking about, give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I also need to alert you to a couple of things. I'm going to be doing some professional workshops starting in October. I will be going to most of the major cities for professionals only. This will be professional training. But I'm going to see what I can do to open the doors to members of the general public, too. The only issue there, I always I welcome individuals who are not professionals into my professional training. But the problem is that for most people, it's unaffordable. The fees usually associated with professional workshops, because they're generally less populous. The number of professionals that usually attend these things is usually 100 or less, as opposed to in the hundreds or maybe larger. And so the per person rate, in order to put these things on, to rent the space and all like that, the organizers just, the per person price has to be a certain amount in order just to cover all expenses, and of course to make the presenter a reasonable fee. So it's a little bit more difficult for individuals from the general public to come to these things, but I'm not sure yet whether or not the organizers will allow the general public in. I'm working on that. I like to have all my workshops open. We'll see about that. I'll have more information coming up about that. Also looks like we're getting closer to fixing the date for the fall webinar. One of the problems with fixing a date has been scheduling, especially now that professional workshops are being scheduled too, and also picking the right platform, the right affordable platform for the number of folks that I'd like to have join the webinar. But it looks like we're getting very close to fixing the date and fixing the format, so I'll have some announcements very soon about that, and I'll have information posted on the blog. I know I've been saying for several weeks that I would be doing that, and it's been a while. I know that, but there are reasons for that. But we'll get that information up as soon as possible. I had to deal with a major computer crash too this past week, and so I'm hoping that everything is good for the broadcast tonight. I'm actually in front of a brand new Macintosh computer. and got a whole new setup here for the audio. So I'm hoping that everything is good, that the quality is good, and be sure to contact me through the Contact Dr. Simon feature on the blog at manipulative-people.com if you notice any glitches or any problems. I need to know about that. We always want the program to be first class. I'm going to take this call. Hang on one second. Hello and welcome to Character Matters.
Good evening, Dr. Simon.
Good evening.
I love your show, and I just wanted to ask you a quick question, please.
Okay.
It is in regard to anger, and I was wondering what your opinion was, your professional opinion, in regard to when people are very angry at you and you don't even understand why, like your teenager or like your husband or even your boss. And sometimes you have the feeling there is it's a control issue, and I would just love to know maybe you could give me an answer to that, quick answer.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, could you be just a little bit more specific, maybe an example or so?
Yes. It is in regard to outbursts of anger. And in regard to something that I thought I didn't even understand why it happened, something really trivial, and if another person then just almost explodes, how should I respond to that? Or like my daughter or my husband sometimes. At one time I had a very bad boss. Mm-hmm. And she was just, it was like down, if it wouldn't go her way or his way, then I was the guilty one, no matter, and I didn't even understand it. It made me very fearful. And that's maybe the issue then. And I had the feeling like I should be controlled by fear or something. Uh-huh. And I always try to talk these things over, but I was just wondering what your...
Okay.
Maybe you have a general advice. It's like these powerful emotions like anger and then fear as a response.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind holding on for just a bit, because I'd like to ask a follow-up question, but let me give you a few thoughts first, okay? Mm-hmm. Anger is an emotion. Mm-hmm. And as an emotion, there's never anything wrong with it per se. Mm-hmm. Now, it can be unhealthy. It actually can be hard on our heart. It can be really unhealthy if we end up becoming angry too often. Mm-hmm. So if we experience the emotion of anger too often, that can be a problem. Also, if we turn the emotion of anger inward, it can be a cause of depression. So anger can be a problem, but most of the time, 90% of the time, anger is a normal, healthy human emotion. Now, how we express anger, the behavior that we show when we are angry, that's a whole different ballgame. Mm-hmm. And there are many demonstrations of rage that seem out of bounds. They seem disproportional yes, to whatever incident might have invited somebody's anger. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, it's disproportionate, exactly.
Yeah. Now, mm-hmm. I can tell you that sometimes that disproportional anger is reflective of various conditions that the person might have, such as a depression that has not fully yet manifested itself or has not fully become internalized, or some other kind of psychological issue. Individuals struggling, for example, with a fair degree of narcissism, when they experience narcissistic insults, what we call narcissistic, in other words, their inflated image is challenged, they can become rageful. And sometimes, now this is really rare, but it can occur. Sometimes these out of proportion expressions of rage are nothing more than a tactic, a manipulation tactic, something to get you to, if the person knows that you're one to quiver in your boots, so to speak, they will use anger and rage, displays of this rage, to basically get you to back down, to basically begin to doubt yourself, to think that you've somehow crossed a line. So there are many, many different reasons for these kinds of behaviors, and there's no way that I can judge from this distance, what's going on. Yes. But yes. I want to emphasize that anger itself as an emotion is rarely a problem. Displays of rage, however, are a whole different ballgame. And sometimes people who use rage as a tactic aren't really as angry as they seem. In other words, they might not be angry at all. They might just know that if they bark loud enough at you, you might just quiver in your boots. And be intimidated
and back down, yes.
Yes. So I don't know if I've helped you filter through this.
Yes, this is very good. I wrote it down while you were talking, and this gives me new ideas. I was just also wondering, how can you help a person like that if the person wants to be helped?
Well, now, of course.
Is that possible, or is it a wrong question?
Now, the issue there, I'll poke at you just a little bit here. The issue there is the question. You use the word help, and help is help is that thing we do. When someone has fallen into the ditch, and there's no ladder, and we just happen to be passing by, and they're going to starve to death because they can't get out of the ditch, and they're calling for help. Help is what we do when somebody is in a position of disadvantage and they're really needing, and here's the other key word, wanting assistance. When somebody is doing these kinds of things, they may not be looking for help at all. So the question is not how do I help them? The question should be, I should say,
how do I help myself?
How do I set
back up?
How do I set the appropriate limits? How do I encourage? How do I encourage better behavior? How do I draw a firm boundary and say, I'm not going to be treated like that. I'm not going to be talked to like that. Remember, I point this out in my book, In Sheep's Clothing, very clearly.
And I read it. I read the book, and still, it's like it needs repetition until
remember that I said there that you always have the right to set the terms of engagement. In other words, you can define the rules for what it takes to have a relationship with you. And in defining those rules, if one of your rules is you speak to me with a civil tone, if that's one of your rules, you always have the right to enforce that. And, you don't have to stand by and listen to somebody rant and rave, use foul language, or show rage disproportionate to the issue you brought to their attention. You don't have to stand for that.
Yes, that's what I think too. Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
But then, that is excellent. So it's also about helping myself.
And it's all.
I think always the good Samaritan in me.
And it's also about encouraging the behavior. You have every right to encourage better behavior for the people that you deal with.
Yes.
So if a person once they've gotten the hint that basically you're not going to stick around and be insulted, you're not going to stick around and be barked at. If they get that message, the next time an issue comes up where you've got a disagreement or you have to confront something and they behave in a more civil way, you might say, hey, I really liked it that this time when we had this engagement, your behavior toward me was more respectful, more civil. You could encourage that kind of behavior, and you'd be surprised how over time, when you set the rules and when you encourage the right kind of behavior, you'd be surprised how over time people get the message.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is excellent. That is excellent. I thank you so much. That is like a good plan here.
Okay.
Thank
Take
you
care.
so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, we have only a few more minutes, but if you'd like to call in tonight, if you want to join the conversation, we've talked about a lot of things tonight, but if you have a question you want to ask me or just something you want to share, maybe you have a bone you want to pick, we have just a few minutes, but give us a call at 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. I'm happy to take your call for the couple of minutes that we have remaining. Boy, this is going to be a great political season. I can just sense it. There are going to be so many teachable moments in this. You know, we need to go through some hard times. It's trying times that test our character. Human beings really need those times. We do. Because that's when we claim our true values. Not the values that we profess, but the values that we really hold. The inner convictions that we really hold in the deepest recesses of our hearts. It's times of trial that flush those things to the surface. It's in times of adversity, times of challenge, that we uncover our real character. And the same is true for our national character. We have some really tough times coming up. There are folks who want to destroy us and who are not going to stop. I've said this many times before. There's a dangerous, dangerous ideology out there. We haven't seen such a dangerous ideology since the days of Hitler and of Aryan supremacy. We haven't seen this ideology before. It's not that it hasn't been around. It's been around many times throughout history. But it's back, and with a vengeance. And we are the target. So we face some very challenging times, not from just this external threat, but also from the internal threat that we've created for ourselves with this culture of entitlement and permissiveness and the character crisis that it has spawned. And we're going to have many teachable moments because those who would lead us are putting their characters on display. And boy, what a parade. What a parade. Just a handful that I can have a modicum of respect for. What a sad, sad statement that is. What a sad statement it is. And it has to change, folks. And we can do that. We can do that one heart at a time, starting with our own. I'll see you again next week for another edition of Character Matters. I'm Dr. George Simon. See you then.